What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they caught wind of a giant skeleton. They would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the Sitchin mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Justin, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Well, today, got a great episode lined up for you guys, as always, but I can admit I'm a little partial. You know, it's my show, so of course I don't think it's great. Everyone's great. But this guy here has been on the podcasting circuit talking about a book he's working on, fascinating subject, for about the past 2 years. But this guy's no newcomer to the podcasting and content creation game. He's been in it since around 2014, 2015. But I've seen him talk on several shows and reached out to him and asked if he'd come on and talk about his upcoming book that he's been working on. So this is an episode, if you're into giants, if you're into the Nephilim, you may just have your paradigm blown today, because this man has come up with a theory that he believes clowns are mirrored images and imitations of the Nephilim. So I'd like to welcome to the show Paul Stobbs from Understanding Conspiracy. So Paul, thank you for coming on today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So the Nephilim and clowns, just mere saying that is kind of a shock factor and a slap to the head of your paradigm.
Yeah.
How did you stumble upon this?
You know what? It's a silly, stupid story that goes on for longer than I would like it to go on every time I try and tell this story. It's the short version is things that weren't clear when I was lost and were hazy kind of became very clear once I was saved. So this is a strictly biblical theory, and it came from being quite versed in biblical history, these concepts. And just when I first came to Christ, I came from the New Age, psychedelic, tripping culture, and I was kind of seeped in occult knowledge and things like this because I was looking for answers to spiritualism and was avoiding the Christian angle for so long. But after some personal experiences and some spiritual attacks, my faith in Christ was pretty well solidified by 2014, not long after I started the channel. And I just went on a journey to try and find out as much as I can about biblical history and where demons come from, because this was personal to me. And then I led on to the Book of Enoch. A lot of work by Gary Wayne was a huge inspiration. I think he's nailed it. And as somebody who wasn't raised in a church, I found a lot of his answers kind of explained to me a lot about the Bible that I wasn't so sure about. That he gave a lot of context for what was really going in this antediluvian age, because floods and the wiping out of a lot of people and corruption of flesh and all these odd concepts, kind of all made sense once I understood the existence of the Nephilim and the Watchers and the mating of angels with human women, And I'm an artist by nature. I by degree as well. I got my degree in fine art around the same year after I graduated in 2014, and I've always just been a guy who sees pattern recognition, and I've always liked to visualize things when I'm thinking about them. So I've always had this curiosity of, well, what would the Nephilim have looked like? That's always been there for me. And I was never really happy or satisfied with most of the artistic renditions I saw during that era of conspiracy a decade ago, because this topic was relatively new then. There was a big subculture online at that time talking about the Nephilim. And people like Rob Skiba, who were talking about it as well and trying to explain, how did they survive after the flood, and inserting his theories and ideas into it. I always watched these presentations and saw these images of like really tanned, huge pectoral muscled men, wearing loincloths with like braided brown hair and with like just like tanned. And I was like, that looks very human. I don't think they would have looked like that if their fathers were angelic. It never sat with me very well, and I always kind of wondered, well, what would they have actually looked like? And so as I gave a brief discussion there, of my background, I was heavily seeked before I was saved in trying to find some kind of spiritual answers by exploring psychedelic realms. And I was studying things like Eastern philosophies and Taoism and all that sort of stuff, trying to understand consciousness and self and what it means for there to be a god and all that kind of stuff, and to get answers fast, I went down the hardcore DMT, acid, mushroom type route. I wanted to see these other dimensions and get to grips with what they actually were, and I wanted to communicate with anything that was on the other side if possible. But for me personally, and I never actually encountered any entities when I did all these things for a good solid 4 years of my life, quite consistently. And I'm not saying I'm disappointed in hindsight. Maybe I was being protected now I think about it. But once I left that life behind, and after exploring these realms and it solidifying for me, the spiritual realm is real. This is a real place separate from me. And then understanding the biblical perspective to answer all these conspiracy questions I was researching at the same time as well, while starting this channel called Understanding Conspiracy, I realized God's real too. And this is his creation, and I'm basically just peeking into the workings of how his creation works. How it was proved enough for me just my own experiences that was real. So I tried to get to know God in a real sense, and I dropped all this ideology of, well, I'm a god. I'm just projecting this reality, and everything's just an ethereal hallucination of consciousness, and we're all just God pretending to forget that word God so we can experience life. All these type of ideas, I just dropped them and thought, no, there's a real creator separate from me, and I need to get to know him. And from that day, I gave myself over to Christ, and in 2014 in March, and that's when I actually started to see entities, not when I was on these psychedelic drugs. That's when they came for me, and they were not pleasant. They were not my friends. I was an enemy to these things. That's the only way I can describe it. I was having constant paralysis, sleep paralysis, strangulation in sleep, monsters just coming at me, shadow people, Hatman entities in dreams chasing me, telling me they're going to kill me. I had moments in waking life where I just passed out and collapsed, paralyzed, and then I felt my darkness started to seep in from the edges of my visions, and I was spiraling into some weird vortex, and then I had to call on Jesus to help me, and I was back in the room, and all these things just kept happening after I'd stopped exploring these realms. And then it culminated in a vision for 10 seconds out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever again. And I recognized where I was instantly. I'm back in the DMT realm, which I was very with, and I was looking up at an enormous black and white lined, big, wide, purple glowing-eyed jester. And I couldn't explain it as anything else. It wasn't wearing jester's clothes. It wasn't like had bells on it or anything. It was shaped and coloured. Its skin was like this, and its big wide mouth wasn't makeup. It could open its mouth like that. It was just like a horrific monster more than anything. And I was looking at this thing.
Was its skin shimmering?
Yeah, it was radiating energy and ethereal, and it was black and white, shimmering, pearlescent, multicolored. It was enormous. I'm talking like a sky. I'm looking up at a skyscraper here, of this beast in front of me.
Was it a mechanical world?
Kind of, yeah. It was the whole machine elf thing, Terence McKenna's machinations. You can try and describe this with language. It falls short every time. But this Jester was a part of the background and the realm at the same time as being a kind of a form too. It's a very trippy place to see it. It's like it was a sculpture coming out of a arabesque wall, but it was conscious. It was alive. It could move. It could look down at me. It saw me. It knew I was there looking at it. You know,
it was the megapixels that was made up of this realm.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, again, I cannot physically describe the detail. I can tell you right now, it looked like a giant jester clown in front of me. And just looking up at this thing for 10 seconds, and I knew, again, because you have this weird familiar... Have you had a dream where you remembered the dream you've already had? It's like, I've been here, but I've already dreamt this before. It's like a familiar dream. That's what it felt like, and it's like, I've been to this place before, the DMT realm. I know I'm back in this same dimension I used to explore, but this time, this thing's here. And I never saw anything...
You're the enemy this time.
Well, yeah, exactly, and now it's looking at me, you know, and it was so large that it kind of had creatures flying around it. That looks small in comparison, but if it was to be put next to me, it'd be like a car next to me. You know, these things that are flying around it. It was just terrifying. And then I'm just back all of a sudden. And people call these things DMT flashbacks. This is a real phenomenon people who do these drugs end up having for temporarily, you know, it's kind of had to stop it fizzles out and disappears. And, you know, I've been sober since that day. I don't smoke cannabis anymore, which I smoked for 8 years every day. I haven't touched a psychedelic since. I don't even drink, you know, and I've quit nicotine as well. And I'm just done with anything like that. And I realized in hindsight, it's kind of now I've come to Jesus. I think these demons, which is what we'll get onto and what they are, saw no use for me anymore. I'm now useless to them. And I think it's more of a if we can't have you, nobody can situation, which is why I think they came for me immediately after I was saved. It's kind of, let's get him before he realizes what he can do to stop us, you know. And luckily, calling on Jesus saved me from that death experience. And as I've got stronger in the faith, these things have stopped and gone now and left me alone. It doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. But that initial leaving behind that life did give me these experiences, which set me up for what's to come with this research, really, because I'd seen some things. I can't really deny it. I've seen some stuff, you know, what am I supposed to do now, you know, with this information? I didn't know what to make of it then. I knew people saw DMT Jesters on DMT prior to this because I'd seen all the literature, I'd read all the books, I'd followed all the gurus, I'd been on the forums, the next DMT Nexus. I knew this was a phenomena. And here I am, finally, I've seen one of these things for myself, and I'm like, these people aren't joking. Like, this is real. Like, these things are actually there, you know. So, you know, I had enough knowledge by this point from my research into the Christian biblical narrative about the Nephilim to understand that the disembodied spirits are of the Nephilim, as it explains in the Book of Enoch. You know, once they died, that because they are of the earth, their souls are stuck on earth in a way. They're spirits, they're nefeshes, whatever you want to describe it, and they have nowhere to go. They don't leave the place when they die. They just become disembodied, but they're kind of still here, just in this other hidden veil world, which is our world. I describe this place as the plumbing of the universe. They're like stuck behind the walls of our reality, you know. They're in the pipes, they're in the wiring of a machine, you know. They are the ghost in the machine in a sense, and they're in a place where things aren't embodied, and we're in a place where things are embodied. We have a body in which we can be housed in a way, but the body and soul are the same thing. They're interconnected, and we do live a spiritual existence, and this is just as much of a spiritual realm as that realm they're in. We've only made the distinction in our own dualistic way, I've realized, but it's all very trippy and psychedelic to think about, you know. But what I'm saying is where they are is not great. It's not some hyperdimensional, fifth dimensional better place, which most people seem to consider when they do these drugs, like I'm going to a better place. They're in like a really terrible place, which I would not like to stay there much longer than 5 minutes. You would go insane. It's too much. It's too much chaos, you know. And I think that's where the demonic possession phenomena comes from. They are desperate to get back into a body, just to rest. They need to rest. It's too much there. They, you know, not having a body and being surrounded by millions of your buddies, you know, who also are stuck there as well, kind of melding into each other.
Just as miserable as you
creating
are.
Like some kind of weird hive mind, Borg consciousness, all blended together type thing, where they have no sense of self or personality. And I think they're just desperate to get into a body, so they can just sense what it's like to have fingers again, or have eyes, or a nose, or a mouth, or anything. And then usually, because these things are pretty corrupt, they start using the vessel they've got a hold of to do stuff that it wants to feel and taste and see and smell, you know. And that's what demonic possession really is. It's the subtle influence of these entities to make you do things which it wants the pleasure from, and it'll do that through your senses, you know. And it's kind of like a parasite in a way. And again, all this stuff I'm saying because it's kind of, I already had all this foundational knowledge and this understanding that there's a biblical history that explains why these things are here. And now I've seen one for myself. I had no shadow of a doubt that the disembodied spirits which are there of the Nephilim, they look like jesters in this spirit realm. That is what they look like. I've seen them, you know. This is not, and these are not collective archetypes of the Jungian consciousness that people want to talk about, you know, the collective consciousness, archetypical symbols that reflect mankind's thoughts and feelings about certain situations. These are like separate entities from us with real consciousness and their own identities and feelings and thoughts and agendas that are just stuck in this place, and our ignorance of it makes us think that they're us in some way or something, or they always tell a different story to whoever comes along. Oh yeah, well we're like fifth dimensional ascended masters who have come to teach you enlightenment, or we're you from the future, we're humanity's future, you know, and you just have yet to reach our level of consciousness. Something, or we're aliens from an interdimensional galactic venerate. They have a different story to whoever comes to them because they know how to...
Or your dead uncle come back to give you a message.
Exactly, yeah, you know, they can play us, you know, and they know what you want to hear, and that's kind of their game, you know, but they can't hide the way they look, and they always seem to have this psychedelic, fractaled, patterned nature to them, a lot like a jester costume, and they have these unmistakable wide smiles and huge eyes, you know. So anyway, I started to look into kind of biblical history and ideas of the Nephilim and what they look like and artistic renditions, and it's hard to know what you're looking for because all we really have are like depictions of giant people from like the Middle East, the Mesopotamian myths and Enkidu and all these type of things, and they look kind of human, you know. We have the skulls, the elongated skulls, and we can infer what that would look like with skin, but it's just a guess, you know. Exactly, one right next to you there. I want to get one of them for myself, actually, for my own studio I'm going to be making, but you can only infer what they're going to look like. Etsy, there you go. But the problem is, have you ever seen these scientific renditions of what like they would think a cat looks like based on its skeleton? And it's like this monstrous, thin, horrible looking thing, but when you see it in reality, it's this fluffy, cute thing, you know. I don't think we can really interpret what that skull behind you with skin would actually look like. I don't think we fully understand even what the nature of its skin would be, if it's part reptilian. It's not like us. They don't look human when you put skin on that skeleton, you know. It's like, have you seen like the animal like a hippo, for example? A skeleton of a hippo. It's monstrous, and you would think it was some vicious, sharp-toothed, thin, muscly beast, but you look at them, it's this plump, round, silly-looking thing, you know. And I think that's what we have to apply to these skeletons we found of these giants, you know, which most of them went missing in the 1800s when the Smithsonian rolled in. But from what we can infer from the descriptions in the newspaper clippings from those eras, they were not human-looking. They were weird. These giant skeletons were very strange. Even Josephus, Flavius Josephus, one of the first century Jewish historians, he's describing in his things like, just down the road you can go see one of these skeleton bones of these giants. You can go see them on display. And it says the countenance is unlike anything we've ever seen. He's saying these are not humans. These do not look like human skeletons. Like, they look nuts. Like, there's something weird about them. But all the artistic renditions I ever saw, which are made by artists in the modern day trying to imagine giants, it's just human-looking things. And again, this weird connect. All this stuff was firing off at once, and then 2016 came along, and we had the creepy clown sightings, didn't we? Where people were making people jump or scaring them by standing menacingly on the edges of forests with a clown costume on, holding a balloon or something, or on the side of like freeways or in front of schools in some cases. And it became the creepy clown sighting phenomenon of 2016. Every news station was talking about this.
Are you a hunter, hiker, prepper, or just someone who likes to enjoy the great outdoors? If you are, you know that good quality gear is hard to come by. Squatch survival gear is veteran owned and 100% made in America, baby. And their cryptid inspired line has you covered. Everything from Sasquatch to Mothman. Whether it's a weekend trip, a day hike, or the ultimate bug out bag, Squatch Survival Gear has you covered. Head on over to squatchsurvivalgear.com and use the code PLP10 for 10% off store-wide. Do you have a podcast or small business? Do you want to expose that business or podcast to thousands of people each week for an entire year for less than one car payment?
Now you have my attention.
I'm looking for sponsors of this show. I know you have seen and heard the Kevlar Joe ads on the podcast and YouTube channel. I can do the same for your podcast or business each and every week. I promise you, you're not going to find a better advertisement value for your buck. My contact info can be found on my website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, or reach out to me on social media. Let's talk, and let me show you how you can grow your brand effectively and cheaply.
Something clicked then. And I was like, I know enough about the occult and about secret societies to know that nothing gets on that box in the corner of my living room unless they want it to be there. Everything's a symbol. Everything's a message, especially if all the news is picking up on it from every station, everywhere. Across countries, England, Europe, and America, especially the Western world. Why? Why are they showing this? And I knew the clown is a symbol for something. The clown means something to these people. They wouldn't be saying creepy clown sightings. People are sighting clowns, mysterious figures of clowns everywhere, unless that meant something to them. And it all kind of just amalgamated in my mind at that moment. I was like, okay, so we have Nephilim disembodied spirits, which are the demons today, which look like clowns and jesters in the spirit realm, and now they're talking about clowns on TV returning, and people are going to start seeing them, and it's going to get weird and trippy, So I just did a search, Nephilim and clown, and I found nothing. No one has ever done any research and put these two things together in any serious capacity. Credit where credit's due. There was one guy called The Epic Conspiracy on YouTube. I think he had like 200 subscribers and had made some parody videos making fun of conspiracy theorists. And he did it in typical History Channel style, And he did one on the Nephilim. And he described what the Nephilim looked like. And he says, the Nephilim have white skin and red hair and, a giant mouths and all these type of things and 2 sets of teeth. And there's only one explanation. These things are interdimensional killer clowns from out of space. And then he showed the 80s movie image next to it, and making a joke about the Nephilim. And I realized actually...
Yeah, and what's crazy is in that movie, they wrapped them up in cotton candy and ate them.
Yeah. And they were often depicted in the shadows as lizards, giant lizards at one point. The shadow turned into a T-Rex and ate somebody at a bus stop, I believe. So it's kind of this whole reptilian hybrid mixed with clown. It's been there forever, and we'll get into that later about the media, but they've been showing this for a long time. It's one of those symbols where once you see it, you can't see it. It's like it's hidden in plain sight and always has been hidden in plain sight. It's one of those symbols. So that was it. From that moment when that guy made that joke, I rolled with it. I was like, there was more to this than this guy lets on. He doesn't even believe the Nephilim exists, so let's forget about that. He's just having a joke. But I knew there was something here, so I went with it. And one connection after another. 8 years later now, I'm about to release the 44th episode of a series dedicated to this. I'm about to publish my first book on the subject, Volume 1, which lays out all the history of where we get a clown from. But it's come to fruition, and it's obvious now that what we call a clown was a purposefully crafted Western symbol modeled after Eastern demons. And that's exactly the Rakshasas specifically. But it also has its early roots in medieval wild man tradition as well, which is the Europeans' flavour of giants, hairy wild beast men, and the Nephilim as well, which were actually a lot more colourful than we think when we actually start looking into it. They weren't just had big brown or green hair or anything. They were actually quite psychedelic, hairy looking beasts, possibly feathered as well in some cases. It gets really weird. But what we call a clown was purposefully created by Freemasonry to represent demons, and it's done for a specific reason. It's actually a tool that is used for the specific purpose of channeling the Nephilim from the spirit realm. And this is a practice done by hundreds of cultures all over the earth on every continent. They dress like things to channel the things, or to be possessed by the things, and in some slightly rarer cases to scare away things, though I don't think there's much validity to that train of thought personally from my research. I think they're a bit naive if they think dressing like a demon is going to scare away a demon. But everywhere else the practice is quite straightforward. We white up our face and put red lipstick on and multicoloured patterned skin and dots and fractal patterns, and put a shiny costume on with a wild feathery red headdress because we want to channel our ancestors. And they believe the Nephilim to be the creators of their civilizations. That's what they mean by ancestor. They don't mean aunties or uncles. They mean ancient gods. And that's what they're doing. They're dressing like clowns to channel the Nephilim spirits. And what we have done in the West is create our own version of this costume, and we call it a clown. And it's hidden from us, but it's used for the same purpose. And quite nefariously, it seems like it's been pushed on us and our society to open up more channels to the spirit realm by popularizing the clown in modern mainstream media. And we're all conspiracy theorists here. It's fully controlled by the occultists and the secret societies for this very reason. So that's it. That's all of it in a nutshell, where it came from, where the work led to. So we can get into some details now. But there we go.
Yeah, well, as far as like the details of the of the costume, the red nose and the color of the skin and the big feet, just all these different characteristics. During your research, have you found this like as a progression through history and with different cultures and the practice, like of it coming through? Mm-hmm. And if you have, like, could you give some like examples and kind of build this costume up piece by piece and show us where it come from, where have you seen it in other cultures and the common themes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So the base of a costume of a clown is white skin. Okay, and that's white chalk makeup is what clowns tend to put on, grease paint of some kind. You can get into the really later iterations of 20th century clowns where you get like peach-coloured or hobo face paint, but they're kind of like character clowns based off the original clowns, which is white grease paint, or Pedrolino from the Commedia dell'arte, or Poirot from the French tradition. It's basically just like a white ghost wearing a white costume. But that is the base of a clown, and that is actually rooted in just a direct mirror of descriptions of Nephilim themselves. In every culture, wherever giants have been present, they're always described as having really, really pale skin for some reason. The most famous examples are like the city car of the Northern Plains of America, for example, the mound builders, these giant, pale-skinned, red-haired, cannibalistic tribes that went around brutalizing a lot of these tribes of the North American plains, and that war was made with them. And the story goes that they were trapped into Lovelock Cave, the giants, and the Indians clogged up the entrance of the cave with very flammable things and just set fire to it and basically smoked them out, and they died in that cave. And there was later evidence from archaeological digs to prove that there were plenty of things that were living in here, and skeletons were found and all sorts of stuff that seems to corroborate the story is true. So there's this other tradition as well. There's a woman who from these tribes who still travels today, and I've got her in my book. My name is eluding me right now, but she you can find out about her. It's called a mourning dress, and they have these things they pass down in their family's tradition, and she still has hers today, and she goes around showing it people. But it's basically made of red hair, which they got from scalping these giants, basically, and they turn it into like a shawl of some kind, and they call it a mourning dress, and it's kind of like passed down as a symbol through the family of defeating the giants, But again, the common descriptor is white skin and red hair. That is the base of a clown, and that's why our modern clown has the same thing. But it doesn't just end there. If you go, for example, all the way to Australia, and then you go to the middle western area of Australia called the Kimberley region. So we're talking right in the outback here, in the middle of the desert, basically. You get these people who have a very specific god called a Wandjina. Now, a Wandjina is supposed to be the bringers of rain and thunder. They're weather gods of some kind. So they have powers that control the weather, first of all. But they were also very tangible, physical, walking on two-legged giants as well. They were the one in the same. They say they're both ethereal and physical simultaneously. So they had human physical properties and mystical, magical, angelic properties, basically in one form. And it's said that they helped teach mankind how to build society. Basically, they were heavily involved in culture building, and these people equate them to being the builders of their ancient civilization. So the ancestors, once again, the same story you'll find gets applied quite a lot of places, but in this one isolated region of Australia, and Australia's huge, by the way, it's enormous, so there's a lot of tribes here, and I'm just focusing on one, and they quite literally paint the Wandjina on the rocks to look like clowns, and I'm talking very literally here. They have white skin, big black eyes, no mouth, funnily enough, but I've seen depictions where they have a red nose, a round red circle for a nose, and a big red halo, which looks like a red clown wig. And then the costume this thing's wearing quite literally has a white ruff around the neck, like modern clowns today in the West, the exact same shape, and its costume is red with white polka dots, like a clown costume. So you can see the direct influence our clown costumes in the West today had got from this very specific isolated tribe, which was representing the offspring of the rainbow serpents. Okay, so these are hybrid rainbow serpent creatures which have some kind of human property to them, which were giants. There's many depictions of them holding tiny people, okay? And they built the ancient civilizations these people venerated, and when they died, it said they drew a self-portrait on the inside of a cave, and now the shamans of the area today repaint them every year, and only they're allowed to do it to keep it true to its original form, and they look very much like a Western clown. It's actually stupid how much they look like a clown. So clearly, whoever created the clown, this model image of we call the clown, had seen this. They must have seen these things and brought it back to the West and incorporated it as a viable costume for their version of the same spirit, of the same thing, So there you go. So there's two examples. You've got the city car, white skin, red hair. You've got this pale skin thing over here. But if you go to let's say, Greece. In Greece, they have their own mythos of pantheons of angelic gods, mating with human women. It's quite common, actually. I think Zeus is said to have like 53 children with human women or something like that, creating these demigod hybrid, half god, half human hybrids of some kind, taking shape-shifting and changing form, becoming animals to rape women, or becoming like the king of a queen while the king's away, and sleeping with the queen for a weekend before the king comes back. Things like this were always happening. But then it seems things got really weird and monsters were being created at the same time. And it seems like one particular sea god called Typhon had sex with a siren called Echidna. Okay, so he was like a primordial sea god, serpentine sea god. So this is a sea dragon by any stretch of the imagination. This is an angel. This is a seraphim angel, a fiery flying serpent, but of the sea. And sea dragons are very common even in Chinese mythos. There's even a story in China where the sea dragons rebelled against the Jade Emperor to bring rain for the people, so the rain bringers again. You see these common themes everywhere. Anyway, back to...
Yeah, a different telling of Prometheus.
Bringing the fire from the gods, giving it to the humans. Yeah, that's a typical Luciferian doctrine as well. It's all there. But you've got this... If you zoom in on this particular one, you've got this sea god serpent monster, which is, I will call it a seraphim angel. That's what it was, just by a different name. It was called Typhon. And it says it slept with Echidna, who was called the mother of monsters. Now, we have to go back to the Book of Enoch now, which gives an explanation for what this is. It says that the women who originally mated with the Watchers, and who the Watchers took as wives, they became sirens, is what it says. So what does that mean? What does it mean to become a siren? Well, it usually means to become a half-human, half-animal hybrid of some kind. And I've theorized and speculated this was likely done to these women to make them stronger, to make them more capable of birthing giants, basically. because a human woman wouldn't be able to cut it alone. We're too weak and fleshy and soft, and a giant grows pretty fast in the womb and would just burst out of them alien style, and often killed the women. So I think to stop this from happening, they had to hybridize the women. And it was kind of a gift as well, because they made them superhuman. They made them super strong and fearsome and powerful, gave them serpent features. So often, echidna, for example, it has 2 snake legs and a woman's body on top, So she was hybridized, and it says she used to be a human. That's how it works. That's what sirens are. They're ex-women, they're ex-men, they're mutants now. They've been changed. And other versions of sirens are mermaids. That's a classic siren, or the harpies, the half-flying women, bird women. They're sirens. It comes under the same umbrella. And Echidna was just a very specific siren who was kind of prized by the gods. She was given a golden room buried somewhere where she could live out comfortably by the gods. They loved this thing. I don't know why, because she was a monster maker. She created beasts. She's equated with creating 12 of the most infamous beasts of Greek mythology, including Cerberus, the Hydra, the many-headed snakes, Chimera as well, and the Gorgons specifically. Now the Gorgons are very interesting because that's Medusa by popular standards, but obviously they had sisters as well, and God knows how many actual Gorgons really existed. I think you get these stories talking about sea gods, serpent gods mixing with serpent women creating monsters, but we don't actually know how many of was actually happening and how many gods were doing these, but you get these general mythos created, I talk about specific ones, but Gorgons were interesting looking creatures on the early artwork depictions you can find from ancient Greece. They're not like what we see today. So you get Jason and the Argonauts films, for example. The classic Medusa is a snake woman with snakes for hair. That is not what she looked like. That is not at all even close to the original depictions of the original Gorgons and Medusa. Medusa had a human body with human legs, human arms, but she was depicted as being giant compared to everything else around her. She also had wings like an angel, and she had red-haired dreadlocks, and she had a very white, pale skin with a huge smile, ear-to-ear grin, with sharp, fanged teeth sticking out the top and the bottom, with wild, bulging, crazy eyes. That image I've just described to you is everywhere, all over the earth. We're talking every culture has their own version of that thing I just described to you. It's called the Rakshasa in India. They're called the Oni in Japan. They go all through the Indic regions, Hindu regions specifically. It's just awash with different variations of the Rakshasa by many names. This big wide-grinned, buck-toothed, wild-eyed looking snake hybrid human thing. This is a Nephilim creature. This is a offspring of a siren woman mixing with a serpent of some kind, a serpent god. These are the fallen angel watchers mixing with women. You get something like the Gorgon. You get what I just described to you there. And these early depictions, pale white skin, red hair, everywhere. And again, go to all these other continents where you see the Rakshasa, white skin, fiery red hair, big wide bulging eyes, and a huge grin, and even the tongue sticking out. Very common motif to include with it, which is a typical childish clown like today, to stick the tongue out to mock people. It's always been there, and like I said, people have seen these similarities in all these cultures. The Freemasons are traveling men. That's what they do, isn't it? They dominate the earth. They go around, they pick and choose things from other cultures, find more occult symbols and bring them back to their lodges and incorporate it into their odd mystery wisdom schools, So while doing these travels, they clearly picked up these traits and put it together into this image, a caricature we have been told is called a clown. But it's not a laughing matter. It's not really for the kids. They're trying to mimic something. They're trying to emulate something. They're trying to make this thing look like something. And the resemblances, just these ones alone, these few examples I gave here are uncanny. Like, they're identical to modern clowns. And episode 42 of my series is probably the best one to go to get a good overview of that specific look I've just described and how it is across all continents. Even in North America, you even get the center of the Aztec calendar. You have the wide grinning tongue sticking out, sun god in the middle. But America, again, is just awash with all sorts of things. Dry America and the clown societies. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm about to release my next episode on this. It's coming out tomorrow. It's already scheduled and ready to go. It's about sacred clowning, and this is a very specific thing, which is quite unique to America because they don't seem to have any other example of Nephilim other than specifically this type of thing, this sacred clowning. And they seem to have equated to this image something irreverent, backwards, wholly against societal norms, but they've incorporated it into their society as an example of how not to be.
Hey guys, got a call to action for you. If you guys are enjoying the episode and have not done so already, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and if you're listening on a podcast platform, please take the time to give us a 5-star review. This helps us to grow the show and to reach new listeners. Back to the episode.
So it's kind of a healing process to it. So props to the culture for managing to turn something terrible into something good. I'm not saying the cultures are evil that do these things. Their intentions are honest. They're not trying to do anything wrong here. They're trying to show how not to behave by acting like the contrary while dressed in this specific garb. But the black fractal line thing I've described there is exactly what I saw in my vision. These are the DMT Jesters. They are quite literally dressing like, with odd-shaped horns that dangle down, with red makeup. They eat watermelon, which looks like they're eating flesh, which covers their body and mouth in red, which looks like they're literally eating things, like people and blood. And in a way, it's like something from the ancient past has echoed into the traditions of the modern day. And the odd thing about the sacred clown is that you can go to all these cultures, whether it goes through Canada, through to the Great Plains, and then further south through Mexico, and then all the way down south to the Tierra del Fuego part of Chile, and right at the tip, at the bottom of South America. They have their own version for the Selknam tribes, but they tell you, we're dressing like demons. And it looks the same as what these other cultures are doing in the northern continent, where they say they're channeling primordial gods and beings for the sake of bringing betterment to the tribe. Now, their intentions are different, because it's odd, because if you go to the Lakota peoples, more to the Canadian border, they believe when they dress in a certain way, the shaman, who's known as a Heyoka, is dressing like a specific god, a thunder god who brings rain, once again, just like the Wanjinas I was telling you about in Australia. And they dress like him in the hopes to communicate with him in order to plead with him, please don't bring thunder and rain, it will destroy us. That's the purpose of dressing like that way with the black and white fractal patterns. The Heyoka, or the tribe, has trusted that the Heyoka will do the correct groveling to this thing by channeling it in order to appease it so it won't destroy them with bad weather. So it's out of fear they dress this way. And it's kind of like they say people who become Heyokas don't choose to be that way. Something happens to them, mainly at birth, where they can just be more in tune with the spirit realm. So they kind of have to become one for the tribe. They're like the direct line to the spirit realm, and we need them to appease these monsters that bring terrible things upon us. But it's funny, if you go further south to like the Hopi regions, and going into like the desert area of America and these tribes around there, they want rain, and they dress this way in the hopes of bringing rain instead. Give us more rain. And they don't call it anything specific. They just call these things Pueblo clowns. But they're dressing the same way because they want to encourage the thing to bring rain instead, because they're different circumstances. They're in a very cold climate in the north where the Heyoka are, compared to these hot, dry, arid climates further south. So they're appeasing to the same being for rain for different reasons. Don't bring rain in the north, please bring rain in the south. But they're dressing in identical fashion. So these things, cultures technically separate from one another, have the same costume to channel a specific entity that does the same thing, controls rain and weather. It's odd that why would they have the same, unless they both encountered something that looked the same. This thing looks like this the way they've dressed, which is very, very reminiscent of a typical medieval Venetian jester. Very reminiscent. And it's just odd. And then again, you go way further south, thousands of miles, all the way to the tip of Argentina. And this tribe, which sadly is pretty much almost extinct due to genocide, They dress in the same way, black and white fractal patterns and lines and polka dots with slightly more weird motifs like cone heads and stuff, which you find in Europe, by the way, with the Wildman traditions. So it's odd that even translated over from Europe to the Tierra del Fuego regions. But they also have the same antenna horns, which we see in these northern versions, black and white stripes. So this thing was continental. It spanned thousands upon thousands of miles and inspired culture, hundreds and hundreds of cultures, clearly, with the way it looked, for them to copy it in the way they dress in these traditions that are passed down through oral tradition, through century after century after century, over millennia, So something interacted with these peoples a long time ago in that specific geographic locations of the North and South Americas that looked like a black and white fractal jester monster. And the only thing I can find throughout biblical history, and even history alone, that even comes close, is the Nephilim, which would have had serpentine patterned featured skin inherited from the seraphim parents, the fiery flying serpents. Because you have to remember, these things are dragon-human hybrids. So the Nephilim did not look human because of this. And they're angelic, so they glowed. They had powers. They were weird. They were trippy-looking things, you know what I mean? And they looked like clowns. And again, all these cultures, I'll give you just a brief overview there. All these features everywhere have just been melded into a Western version we call a clown. And just one more feature I think is worth mentioning here for the clown costume. Big red shoes. That is actually a specific thing the Pueblo clowns do wear for the Zuni and Hopi Indians. They dress like the black and white fractal jester monster, they act like clowns, and they wear big floppy red shoes. So that was clearly a feature that was picked up from these cultures and put into the Western version. That's where it comes from. Someone's copied it from specifically the North American versions of the Nephilim. So yeah, everything about a clown is just stolen imagery from other cultures that represent the same creatures, just by different names.
And I'm sure with your research that you've stumbled across it, but as you were talking about the serpents and the Greek mythology, I immediately, when you mentioned this wife, this Cyrene wife or breeder of Typhon, that she was specifically the mother of all monsters, I immediately went to, in my mind, to the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, because that's the exact title that they give Tiamat, that she was the mother of all monsters. And then South America, Quetzalcoatl, he was a feathered plumed serpent. And then it also, him in human form, they said he was pale-skinned with a beard and came riding on a raft of serpents. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you find all these, especially dragon iconography. Like I say, Quetzalcoatl, the plumed, multicolored flying serpents. You got serpent gods as well in Egypt. The feathered serpent is a very common god there. You have the dragons of China. You have the rainbow serpents of the Wangina, which come from the Australian regions. The rainbow serpents were said to be the ancient gods of the universe who created the earth by snaking their bodies through the landscape and making mountains and rivers and stuff. You got the dragons seem to always be equated with being powerful gods who played a role in creation. Okay, and that actually matches up to the story of God and his closest angels, which are the seraphim, who sing "Holy, Holy, Holy" next to his throne. I think they were there from the beginning, and I think they didn't help God create anything. I think dragons play, all angels in fact, they don't all look like dragons, just the seraphim specifically are described as fiery flying serpents. That's what seraphim quite literally translates to. I think they were just the ones that did look like dragons. I think they were the ones who were closest to God. I think they are the ones God trusted the most and allowed to come down to man and watch over us, and they betrayed that trust, and that's why we get this odd mythos everywhere of dragons mixing with the land in some way, or melding, or Father Sky mixing with Mother Earth or something. There's many allegorical ways of describing it, but you'll find it's pretty much everywhere. The dragon mythos is everywhere, and they always have offspring which amalgamate into something akin to what I'm describing here, which are the Nephilim. These odd giants that glowed with huge eyes, big wide grins, fiery glowing hair, which is like red or gold or multicolored shimmering, psychedelic patterned serpent-like reptilian skin covered in all sorts of colors and just shining like crazy, and just giant humanoid-esque bodies. It's a very weird, terrifying thing to imagine, but if you were to condense that down into a cartoon, it would look like a clown. That's kind of why we have clowns. And to dress like a thing is not trivial to any of these cultures I've just described. They dress this way to channel sacred ancient gods. We have just trivialized it in the West. Clowns are just something silly for the kids. We do not understand the consequences of dressing that way, and that's the point. We're not supposed to realize what's going on there. It's very dangerous, and actually it's terrifying how dangerous this actually is when you really start to think about what I'm saying here. Ignorance of the law is not going to make you immune to this spiritual law. You dress like the thing to be possessed by the thing, and we have more and more people dressing like clowns than ever today in the Western world, and that is by design. I mean, just this last year alone, 2023 was the year of the clown in fashion. Clown core fashion was hitting runways. Legitimate models of high-end fashion industries were walking down catwalks wearing big red noses and wigs and silly Harlequin inspired designs and clown inspired clothing and designs. It seems silly there in the catwalk context, but what you see there trickles down into the outlets eventually, and we get a watered down version. So they're even trying to make us dress like a clown as a legitimate fashion choice. Like, not even like a joke. Like, this is serious. This is hot. This is what you want to look like. You look like a fool if you're not dressing like a clown. That type of thing. They're selling it to people, and people are buying it now. There's a whole underground subculture on TikTok called clowncore fashion, which is quite literally just Gen Z dressing like clowns. And they call it the clown aesthetic. Get the clown aesthetic by doing these simple things. It's kind of... This is a symptom of something quite sinister. And it's no surprise that every so often, every 10 years, there's a reboot of the Joker. There's a new Joker, a new actor playing the role, or there's a new reboot of It that comes out, or there's a new clown killer movie or something. I don't know. They'll rehash anything they can to continuously keep it alive. In the 80s, we had Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Well, in 2024, we've got the game coming out on Xbox Premium soon. Get it now. Like the Killer Clowns from Outer Space game. They cannot let it die. They want to keep it in the mind of the conscious people for as long as they can as a meme, because every Halloween it inspires more people to dress this way. And Halloween, again, is not a simple just holiday to dress like something to scare away evil spirits, as they kind of imply that's what it's about. It's Samhain. It's when the realm between the physical world and the spirit realm is at its thinnest. This is an ancient Celtic rite. It's a invocation ritual time. And they dress like the thing to channel the thing. They dress like wild men spirits, half human, half animal hybrids, and in the hopes of communicating with them in the ancient sense. And when Halloween rolls around and you get people dressing like the Joker, because that's the hot new thing, you've just opened up a lot of channels to the spirit realm to allow more Nephilim creatures to get into our realm, into our bodies. And the aim is we're not supposed to know. They don't want us to know that's what's going on. That's why it's an occult hidden symbol, and that's the point of being occulted. It's hidden from us, and only the initiated understand the true meaning and power behind symbols and what they do exactly. But that doesn't mean the ignorant masses involved in the ritual aren't falling victim to it. And
and you had a bunch of girls dressing like Harlequin. From DC, the DC comic, all the remakes of the movie and stuff they've done recently. And you mentioned the Wild Man. I definitely want to touch on that, but before our time's up here.
Sure.
With this Wild Man, as American, we equate that with Bigfoot, and we always think of this, hairy man or this big ape. But you're from Britain, and you have your own version of the Wild Man, and he's a little different. But we see that, with this Nephilim hybrid gene. And I heard you mention on an episode that one of the Freemasons, or I'm not sure if he was a Freemason, but the one that came up with the first Harlequin, the inspiration was the Wild Man. And then you mentioned it too with all that, and I've seen like I might be mispronouncing it, but in Sardinia, the Methunes or the Methanes, you know, around the New Year they would dress up in these hairy goat costumes and load down with all kinds of bells, and they would put on this mask and they would dance through the town and do these ritualistic dances around fires and through the town, and they said it was to that they don't even remember where it come from. It was just an ancient tradition that they've done since archaic times, but they believe it was them scaring off the cold, bad weather to bring in, you know, good weather and stuff like that. So definitely fascinating there.
That tends to be...
and Krampus.
Yeah, Krampus is a great example. Actually, Krampus is just it's a German iteration of the same thing, the same principle, the Wild Man of Europe. The Wild Man of Europe is a very ancient tradition that can mainly be traced back to the Thracian culture, which is today Romania. This is where Dionysus comes from, which became a Greek pantheon member eventually. Dionysus was always considered like a foreign god, you know, not really... I don't know, like an outsider of sorts. Dionysus is considered the god of theatre, the patron saint of theatre. His symbol was the ivy leaf, which was always put onto the mouths of the masks, which is a heart shape. And that's where we get the modern heart shape from, which we equate to, you know, romance and love and passion and sex and things like this, because he was the god of sex and debauchery and parties and all these type of things as well, and plays, and he had a band of merry men that followed him, which were fauns and satyrs, you know, these maenads, these hybrid women mixed with these hybrid men, these goat men that would travel with him in one giant orgiastic sex party from village to village, and he would pick up more humans as he went to the next place under his spell, and they would join his giant party, you know, and then they would change into hybrid creatures by sticking around him for long enough under his influence, and they would become wild men themselves, you know, these fawn, horned beast men type things that were just giving into their animal lusts all the time. So you've got this ancient Mediterranean type, Teutonic's north, Mediterranean south. You got this Mediterranean mythos kind of blending together and spreading all throughout this Celtic culture as well, you know, and it's always been there throughout Europe. In every culture, this representation of a wild, hairy beast creature with a big, wide smile and wild eyes and just giving into lusts, and they're actually quite colourful representations most everywhere you go. They're not typically always like just pale white goat hair or something. That is also very common. And it's not distinctly a European phenomenon. You'll find every country has a wild man, has a hairy beast. The Himalayas have the Yeti, for example. You know, just pulling one out the top of my head. America has Bigfoot. You know, they all have their own kind of version of this. And maybe I can get my book up.
I even found China has one. They call it the urine.
The urine, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to quickly get up my book, actually, and I do have a chapter specifically on this where I've listed quite a lot of them out, so maybe it's just a good idea just to go through a few while I've got you here and your audience can see. I'm just trying to wait for the document to load. But while I'm waiting for that to load, yeah, the Wild Man of Europe is the source of the modern clown in European theatre. So when Rome collapsed, you have to understand there was a lot of actors out of work at that time because acting was considered quite a dirty thing to do and to be. But yeah, you have to remember a lot of these actors were out of work at this time because the Catholics considered it like being a prostitute to be an actor. So a lot of these troupes kind of started to travel Europe in groups out of Italy, and they formed a little band of satirists and performers that were put on quick little stages before moving on to the next village and doing it again just to get some money in a hat, you know. And this developed to became known as the Commedia dell'arte movement. And out of the Commedia dell'arte movement, you found after 1,000 years, I'm talking like from the 500 to 1600, like 1,000 years of traveling here, they developed their characters perfectly. And they were kind of known as basic stock characters anybody could recognize no matter where you were from. And those characters were based off of real things like soldiers, rich men, kings, queens, servants, or there's the stock zany characters, just things people could recognize, policemen, stuff like that, you know. And for some reason, this addition was added in the coming out of that period of time in the 1600s called Harlequin. Now, Harlequin is quite literally the representation of the wild man, because it was everywhere, and they realized this is a stock character that everyone would recognize. So they included the wild man into their own traveling show, you know, and he was very colourful. He was very psychedelic and Harlequin patterned in nature with the diamonds, you know, and he had white skin with multicoloured tufts of hair attached to him. He had a horrible beast mask with an upturned nose. He carried around a club, and this is modelled after Harlequins, who was the French version of the wild man.
What's going on, guys? This is Justin from the Prometheus Lens podcast. Have you head over to our website yet and checked out our store? If not, you need to. You're missing out. FOMO is a real thing. Fear of missing out. But if you go to the website and go to the store link, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies, we have tank tops, multiple colors. We even have a coffee mug to put your Kevlar Joe's coffee in. It's really cool. And we actually have 3 or 4 different designs and some new ones that just come out recently. Check some of these guys out. We have the classic logo tee. Got the logo on the front, has a QR code on the back so people can see it, scan it, and go straight to the website and find us that way. But then we have this one. We have the "Look up for him, not for them," inspired by the Karen Wilkinson quote in the episode that I done with her. We have a nice scenic wood scene with the logo and a man standing here with a spaceship and a light beaming down at him with the phrase right in the center, "Look up for him, not for them." Same thing, has the QR code on the back to scan to bring people and find the content. And here's one of my personal favorites. Esau, incognito. Got the Bigfoot, the logo inside of the beard. And if you look closely here in the hat, it says, "Hello, my name is not Esau." Got the shades on, trying to blend in. But if you like some of those guys, head on over to the website, check out the store. All these designs, and I think we have another one too that says "Welcome to the Hero's Journey." It has a guy with a backpack walking through the mountains. But all that stuff is available in t-shirts, it's in hoodies, tank tops, multiple things, multiple colors for you to choose from, and we even have a Esau coffee mug for the Kevlar Joes. But all that stuff helps support the show. That is a third-party vendor. People see these shirts, they ask you, "Hey, what is the Prometheus Lens?" And it points them right back to the show here and helps us to grow the show. Appreciate all the love, all the support, guys. Head on over to the store and check out some of the merch. Welcome to the hero's journey. The hero's journey.
Said to have been seen by a 10th century French monk in a monastery while the wild man and his horde of wild beasts and demons roved through the village, you know. And the wild man giant had a club, was covered in hair, was quite literally like 15 to 20 foot tall, and had a bunch of demons running around him. That's identical to the Dionysian description of a giant godlike creature with his Thyrsus staff, which had a pine cone on the end, and his band of merry demon hybrid humans who would go from village to village. This is the same tradition, just more demonized in the future from a Christian perspective, you know. So yeah, the wild man is everywhere, from Portugal all the way up even into Russia. You'll find examples of this, but it covers a huge swath of land. And yeah, that was incorporated into theatre of the time, of late medieval period, early Enlightenment, and it was called Harlequin. So Harlequin is a model of the Europeans' version of Nephilim. So I've got up here on the screen. I think I might just have to move it a little bit so people watching can see. So I'll read this to you, but it says here, maybe I'll just read out some of the passage to you so we can give some examples of the wild men that I've got. It's only a few pages, but it lists it quite succinctly. So, when one imagines larger-than-life humanoid sightings in the modern era, the most mainstream example is the hairy apple of every cryptozoologist's keen eye, Bigfoot. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Sasquatch, also called Bigfoot, from the Salish wild men, is a large, hairy, human-like creature believed by some to still exist in the northwestern United States and western Canada. It is a beast that has captured the imagination of the conspiracy world for decades. However, as we will discover, man has been contending with these monsters for over 5,000 years. I could not skip discussing this particular cryptid, as it is quite important in decoding the origins of the clown in following chapters. As you read, the name Sasquatch has its roots in the Salish word for wild man, and the importance of this point will become far clearer as we discuss the historical origins of the clown in chapter 14. So I've just explained to you the origins there of the wild man. So even Sasquatch is modelled after or named after wild men. It's the same word. So there we go. But yeah, carrying on. If, however, we stay in the Pacific Northwest of the Americas for a little longer, we can learn of a tribe of Indian wild men who were much feared by the local tribes called the Sitka. The Siatic. Oregon and Washington Indians agree that the Siatic Indians are not less than 7 feet tall, and some have been seen that were fully 8 feet in height. They have hairy bodies like a bear. They kill their game entirely by hypnotism and use a strange cream to make themselves invisible. They have great supernatural powers and the gift of ventriloquism, deceiving many ordinary Indians by throwing their voices. They imitate any bird of the Northwest, especially the blue jay, and that they have a very keen sense of smell. Oregon Indians at times have been greatly humiliated by the Siatics' vulgar sense of humour. The Siatics play practical jokes upon them and steal their Indian women. Sometimes an Indian woman comes back, though it's rare that they do. It's believed that the women come back with the blood of the monsters within them, like some form of genetic manipulation took place. Some Indians of the Northwest say that during the process of evolution, the Indian was changed from animal to man, that the Siatic did not absorb the Tamanawais or soul power, and thus he became an anomaly in the Indian process of evolution. For every act of disrespect or aggression towards them, utter devastation will be acted out against the perpetrators, typically taking 12 lives for every one they lose. It's well known among the local tribes not to retaliate against the Siatic when they steal women and food. The price is too high to pay. It's said that the Siatic always leave a tiny branch of cedar tree at places they have visited, or upon people whom they have killed or played a practical joke on. The Duwamish tribe at one time related that some of their women had been stolen, and they stood up to the giants, rebuking their actions verbally. The Siatics, in a fit of rage, then killed 12 of the Duwamish tribe by ripping them in two and throwing them into the air. An elderly member of the tribe claimed she was a witness to the tragedy. While recounting her experience to a reporter in the Oregonian in 1924, it was written that she said, "They took our young men like toys, turning them upside down and ripping them in two like a piece of calico." Never again did the Duwamish tribe seek revenge when the women and babies were stolen by the Snahiyum, or Indians of the night, and brothers to the Noseless One. The truth is that these myths and legends of tall and incredibly hairy ape men capable of great evil and wonders can be found all over the earth, and the giant nature of these beasts makes one think of the Nephilim almost instantaneously. One can't help but be reminded of the descriptions of Esau, the red, hairy, boastful and short-tempered giant who was a mighty hunter. Or Cain, the almost identical vagrant wanderer of the wilds, who was hunted like an animal by Lamech and Tubal-Cain, mistaking his hairy physique for that of a wild beast. The same Cain whose offspring mated with the Watchers to create giants. Though it's only a working theory, it does appear that the Bigfoot phenomena could be partly explained as manifestations of those who possess the genetic markers of Cain, the wild man. They could also be remnants of far older Nephilim beings, such as the Eliud, spoken of in the Book of Enoch, or the monstrous human beings who changed their genetics in the last days before the flood, spoken of in the Book of Giants and the Jubilees. With a quick online search, it's easy to compile the numerous folk tales and legends of tall, hairy beastmen roaming the mountain ranges and caves, having an elusive and menacing presence for all those who encounter them. For example, the Yeti is said to wander the Himalayan mountain range in Asia, and is often described as being a large, bipedal ape-like creature that is covered with brown, grey or white hair having large, sharp teeth. Tibetan lore describes 3 main varieties of yetis: the Nyalmo, which has black fur and is the largest and fiercest, standing between 15 feet tall; the Chuti, which stands around 8 feet tall; and the Rangsimbambo, which has reddish-brown hair and is only 3 to 5 feet tall. The Chochunya is a hominid cryptid reported to exist in Siberia. It is described by most eyewitnesses as 6 to 7 foot tall and human-like, with broad shoulders, a large protruding brow, long matted hair, and occasionally bearing unusually coloured body or fur. There are also reports that these creatures have on occasion taken to eating human flesh, a trait which is not apparent in its Siberian cousins, the Almasti. The Almas, singular, is an ape-like cryptid reported in Central Asia. They are said to inhabit the Asian mountain regions of the Pamir and Caucasus, as well as the Mongolian mountain range of the Altai. Sightings of the Almasti date back as early as the 15th century. This creature has been sighted walking upright just like a human. In fact, it looks more human than a Bigfoot-type creature. It is even said to craft clothes and tools. It is said to resemble a living caveman. Their bodies are covered entirely with thick brown to reddish-brown hair. The facial regions remain uncovered, but patches of skin are dark. The skull structure of the Almasti possess a protruding brow ridge, slanted forehead, flat nose, and large protruding jaw. Their feet are large, and their fingers are long. Their appendages are completely covered with hair, except for their hands. The Almas is a Mongolian word for wild man. The plural, Almasti, is derived from Russian, while other variations of the name are Almasti, Almasla, Manahua, and Ochokochi, which translates as the name for the forest deity in the West Asian regions, such as Azerbaijan and Georgia. Current accounts of the most recent sightings of the Almas located near the southern part of Mongolia, along the Altai Mountains and the Tianshan Pass near the northern border of China. The Yeren, wild man, is a cryptid ape-man reported to inhabit remote mountainous regions of China, most famously in the Shenongjai Forestry District in the Hubei province. Sightings of hairy men have remained constant since the Warring States period circa 3040 BCE, through the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, before solidifying into modern legend of the Yaren. Generally, they are described as savage, strong, and fast-moving, living in mountain caves and descending only to raid villages for food, or for people to wed or rape. Testimonies of the alleged creature typically agree the Yaren walks upright and stands over 2 meters tall, is covered in tawny hair all over the body, especially along the scalp, and has a face reminiscent of both an ape and a human. Other common descriptors include black-red hair, distended eyes, long arms hanging all the way down to the knees, and big feet. The Yaren supposedly laughs when coming across a human. These ape men purportedly lack females entirely and need to abduct and rape women to breed. The Baamanu is a bipedal humanoid primate cryptid that inhabits the mountainous regions of northern Pakistan. Shepherds living in the mountains have reported sightings. The proposed range of the Baamanu covers the Chitral and Karakoram ranges between the Pamirs and Himalaya. This places the Baramanu between the ranges of 2 more famous cryptids, the Almas of the Central Asia and the Yeti of the Himalayas. The Baramanu allegedly possesses both human and ape-like characteristics and has a reputation for abducting women and attempting to mate with them. It is also reported to wear animal skins upon its back and head. The Baramanu appears in folklore of the northern regions of Pakistan, and depending on where the stories come from, it tends to be either described as an ape or a wild man. Meanwhile, in Australia, the Yowie is usually described as a hairy and ape-like creature standing upright between 2.1 meters and 3.6 meters tall. The Yowie's feet are described as much larger than a human's, but alleged Yowie tracks are inconsistent in shape and toe number. And the descriptions of the Yowie foot and footprints provided by the Yowie witnesses are even more varied than those of Bigfoot. The Yowi's nose is described as flat and wide. Some modern writers suggested that it arose through Aboriginal legends of the Yahoo. Robert Holden recounts several stories that purport this from the 19th century, including this European account from 1842. The natives of Australia believe in a monster called the Yahoo. They describe it as resembling a man with long white hair hanging down from head over the features. The arms are extraordinarily long, with great talons, and the feet are turned backwards, so that the imprint of the foot appears as if the being had been travelling in the opposite direction. Altogether, they describe it as a hideous monster of an unearthly character and ape-like appearance. Roaming the border of Spain and France within the Basque mythology, Basaswan is a huge hairy hominid dwelling in the woods. They were thought to build megaliths, protect flocks of livestock, and teach skills such as agriculture and ironworking to humans. They were said to inhabit the forests of Gorbea and Irati. They walked in human fashion, with their bodies covered in hair and a very long mane that reached their feet. In a similar vein, the Gentil, or Gentilac, with the Basque plural, are a race of giants in the Basque mythology with a similar look to the Basaswan. The Gentil are believed to have lived alongside the Basque people. They were hairy and so tall that they could walk in the sea and throw rocks from one mountain to another. This stone throwing led to several tales and explanations for ancient stone buildings and large isolated rocks. The giants were believed to have created the Neolithic monuments, such as dolmens found around the Basque country. They also were said to have invented metallurgy and saw first grew wheat, teaching humans to farm. However, they were unwilling to move to the valleys from the mountains, with a certain unwillingness to progress. In a bizarre turn of events, it's said that they disappeared into the earth under a dolmen in the Aratrazzaran valley of Navarra, when a portentous luminous cloud appeared, and said that this cloud was heralding the birth of Christ, Kixmi. And at the end of the Gentil age, there are many structures and places around the Basque country with Gentil in their name, generally referring to pagan or ancient places supposedly built by the Gentil. Dolmens are Gentilari or Gentiletsk. The Haraspil are Gentilbarats. Caves can be Gentilzulo or Gentilcoba. One can't help but feel these giants have a similar backstory to the mound builders of America. But the story of them fleeing underground in fear once discovering the Messiah has come is certainly fascinating and pertinent to the topic of biblical history. But the stories of giant hairy beasts does not end there. Europe has a rich history of dealing with the wild men, and many of the folk traditions within Eastern Europe, still celebrate the wild men in festivals every year, dressing in the bizarre bell-covered hair suits and performing plays and dances to ward away the evil spirits of the beasts. The most infamous of these would be the cookery traditions of Bulgaria. However, closely related traditions are also found throughout the Balkans and Greece, including Romania and the Pontus. Wild man and its cognates is the common term for the creature in most modern languages. It appears in German as wildermann, in French as homme sauvage, and in Italian as uomo selvatico, forest man. Figures similar to the European wild man occur worldwide from very early times. The earliest recorded example of the type of hair-covered character, Enkidu, of the ancient Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh. The medieval wild man concept also drew on lore about similar beings from the classical world, such as the Roman faun and Sylvanus, and perhaps even Heracles. Several folk traditions about the wild man correspond with ancient practices and beliefs. Notably, peasants in the Grisons tried to capture the wild man by getting him drunk and tying him up in hopes that he would give them his wisdom in exchange for freedom. This suggests an association with an ancient tradition, recorded as early as Xenophon, 354 BC, and appearing in the works of Ovid, Pausanias, and Claudius Elenius, in which shepherds caught a forest being, here termed Selenius or Faunus, in the same manner and for the same purpose. Besides mythological influences, medieval wildman lore also drew on the learned writings of ancient historians. The first historian to describe such beings, Herodotus, places them in western Libya, alongside the headless men with eyes in their chest and dog-faced creatures. After the appearance of the former Persian court physician, Ctesias' book Indica concerning India, which reported Persian beliefs about the subcontinent, and the conquest of Alexander the Great, India became the primary home of fantastic creatures in the Western imagination, and wild men were frequently described as living there. Megasthenes, Seleucus I, Nicator's ambassador to Chandrapacha Maurya, wrote of two kinds of men to be found in India, whom he explicitly described as wild. First, a creature brought to court whose toes faced backwards. Second, a tribe of forest people who had no mouths and who sustained themselves with smells. Wild or Divi people are the characters of Slavic folk demonology. Mythical forest creatures, their names go back to two Slavic roots, dik and div, combining the meaning of wild and amazing, strange. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but are generally considered wild creatures who dwell in the woods with magical abilities and unsavory desires. You find many similar analogues to these creatures in Russian folklore too. The wild man is a monster that has captured the fear and imaginations of all nations for millennia. And it is this particular monster that will become very important when we break down the origins of the Harlequin character out of the medieval theatre in later chapters. For now, I think the repeated descriptors we find make very compelling comparison to that of the Nephilim we learnt about in section 1 of this book. Red hair, large stature, the need for flesh and blood. Lest we also forget the drive to procreate with human women, supernatural abilities, a bizarre sense of humour, and also pride, which is arguably the most Nephilim trait. I believe these creatures are likely to be diluted descendants of the Eliud and Nephil, especially if they are still alive and being witnessed in the modern era. Much mystery surrounds these beings, with a heavy debate as to whether or not they are truly physical or instead supernatural entities. We will soon explore in section 3 the numerous folk traditions found all around the earth, and specifically within Europe, who still perform rituals centered around the wild man to this day. So there you go. That's what I've got on the wild man in my book so far. But as you can see, it's everywhere. It spreads across everything. It's big. It's really big. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, because I was researching it because I'm writing a book, working on one called the Epic of Esau, and I have a whole chapter just trying to build a baseline for the wild man before I go into Esau. And I found just so much stuff. It's like whole books have been written just on the wild man and the wild man traditions. One I found really interesting, it's a guy from your neck of the woods. It was Nick Redfern. He had a book called The Wild Man, and it was really good.
I've not read that one. No, I'll add it to my list.
Yeah.
What's his name? Nick Redfern?
Yeah.
Okay, right, I'll remember that and I'll add it to my list. I'm always looking for more books to read to incorporate into my own research, but that's just one chapter I wrote, just kind of summarising that the wild man is everywhere.
Yeah.
And then later on in the book I go on to describe what I explained to you, that this traditional movement of actors incorporated a character based on the wild man into their set of actors called Harlequin. So Harlequin is a model after those beasts I just mentioned to you there. It's quite literally the first representation of a demon we get in plays in the West, and it's through Harlequin. And now Harlequin had a foil, like a Laurel and Hardy thing going on with the other servant of the rich man, because Harlequin was supposed to be the rich man's servant, and then you had the other servant, which was Pedrolino. Pedrolino was quite boring, a bit of a suck-up. Harlequin was quite a rebel, didn't do what his master wanted him to do, and that was kind of the back and forth, and that was the joke. That's where the humour came from. But that kind of progressed for 200 years into the 1800s, and there was a switch in roles, it seems, and the clown, or Pedrolino, because don't forget, Pedrolino was the Italian version, the original version, but France picked up their own version and created Poirot and Harlequin and Poirot rather than Harlequin and Pedrolino. And in Britain it was Harlequin and Clown. So clown was just a British colloquialism for clodhopper or fool. And the British clown was like a loud, sausage-eating drunk who sung silly songs, you know. The French version of clown was a poet, a sad poet who was always heartbroken, you know. So there's different flavours of clowns, but the British one is where we're going to put our focus and where we get what we have today. So there was an actor called Joseph Grimaldi in the 1800s who just played the role of clown, the British version, brilliantly. He was hilarious. People could just not watch this guy without bursting out in laughter. He was quite renowned for being an amazing actor at playing the role of clown. But he also was one of the first actors to wear a brand new costume, which was made to be worn by the runner of the theatre at the time. And this costume became the industry standard of all future clowns. And Joseph Grimaldi, the actor, has been equated with being the father of modern clowns even to this day because of his amazing performance abilities and the costume he wore, which is where we get all of our modern versions today. Pale white skin, wild red hair, big red nose, multicolored clothing. It was him. Because prior to that, all of the clowns, Pedrolino and Puero included, just dressed in a plain white rag. No patterns at all, just fully white from head to toe. All white. Harlequin was the colourful one, you know, and Pedrolino was the boring one. But that didn't happen in Britain.
More crafty.
In Britain,
and
Harlequin
Loki-like.
became colourful, sure, but more sleek, less monsterish, which he originally was, less hairy, and more sleek with a thin Zorro mask and a sailor's hat, you know, and tight leotard, very lithe, very, very posh and. Yeah, but he used to be more crafty. He kind of just became more of a hopeless romantic by the time Clown was coming around. But his original form was crafty and witty and crude and evil and weird. That's what he was originally, because he's modelled after demons, which is the wild man. But over 200 years, his character got boring, and he became more of just a doting fool for the daughter of the rich man, Columbine. And he would steal the daughter and run away with her on a romantic tryst, you know. And the old man, the father of the daughter, who is the master, would run after them with his servant Pedrolino to stop them, you know, and get his daughter back. And that was kind of the play, you know, and that's where the humour came. But he kind of just became this boring, lovesick idiot.
But guys, thank you for all your love and support. I just found out last night that we have broke into the top 100 Apple podcasts for our category. We were 81st last night. That's just amazing to me. Only been doing this show for like 7 months. We're already breaking in the top 100, and that's because of you guys. Thank you for all your love and support and sharing us with your friends and family and on social media. I'm forever humble and grateful.
Does this guy know how to party or what?
So he wasn't really acting demonic anymore like his original form was. So Clown took over that role and became the more demonic role in Britain, and Harlequin became second fiddle to Clown. It used to be the other way around. Harlequin led the show as the demon. Now Clown's running the show as the demon, and the costume changed at the exact same time. So at this time period when this happened, the costume was actually designed by another man called Charles Dibdin. So they always do name names change. So Charles Dibdin Sr. is a rich, powerful Freemason. He's kind of like a media mogul of the industry for the 1800s. He wrote hundreds of plays and music and songs for the theatres of the day. He's equated with being one of the key songwriters for the British Navy and the songs the sailors would sing when out at sea during wartime. He's been equated with being the one that his songs brought Britain through to victory with keeping the morale of the men up, you know. He's quite a well-renowned musician, very famous, you know, and his son, Charles Dibdin Jr., was given the nepotistic privilege of running the theatre in London. Okay, so he was given Sadler's Wells Theatre, which was like the poor man's version, and then there's the Royal Theatre, which is like the rich man's version. So while heading up Sadler's Wells, where Joseph Grimaldi was working, Joseph Grimaldi also worked at the Royal Theatre as well. He did 2 shows a night in one place at the same time. He back and forth. It was really intense work this guy had. But he dressed Joseph Grimaldi in this new costume. And it's never explained where he got the inspiration from. Historically, you're not going to find the inspiration written down in black and white. It just doesn't exist. You do hear him say, "I did it to make my mark on the industry." so people would know my era of running the plays and writing the plays for Sadler's Wells. But he never explained specifically where he got this brand new costume idea from and what it's modelled after. And if you look at it, it's nuts. It's like psychedelic frill patterns all over the place with multicoloured patterns. It was wild. It's like a dress of some kind. And you look at what the clown used to wear, it was just plain white rags, boring servant rags of like an Elizabethan age, But this was something else. So I looked into it, and it turns out India is where he got the inspiration from. And you can quite clearly see that what he has got there is identical to the costumes that were worn by the Rakshasa demons on the temples in Thailand. It's like he literally just saw it, drew it, took it home, made his own version, and made the clown dress that way. That must have been what happened, actually. That's probably how it actually went down. And it's identical. And the reason I know it's India is because his father, and by proxy, probably his son, were well acquainted with Indian iconography and India in general, because he had a brother, or an uncle. He had an uncle, but Charles Dibdin Sr. had a brother called Thomas Dibdin, who was a part of the East India Company, which was like a commercialized section of the British military who was out there colonizing India at the time, the East India Company. And he actually died out there. And a song was written by Charles Dibdin in memorial to him called Tom Bowling. And that song is still sung today to close out the proms in Britain, which is a big orchestral event every year. So this guy was, historically speaking, a big deal still, and still is today for what he's done. But he was going to move to India. I think Calcutta specifically, because that was the part of India which was being colonized. But his ship didn't set sail due to bad weather, and he seems to have changed his mind last minute from what I've read in his memoirs and stuff. And he knew India well. He had been there before. His brother was working there as well. And I believe he brought the information back to Britain with him because he was a member of the Freemasons, at least the third degree, because you can find an ode to him in the Leicester Lodge manual pamphlets from 1922, having a section about him. Let's remember our late brother Charles Dibdin, and let's be reminded of the great work he did for the craft. And in this soliloquy, it's got like one of his shows he wrote, which was called Harlequin Freemason, and it's about Freemasonry in the Harlequinade sense. And I've got the whole thing in my book all laid out. I've got the receipts for this, and you can go find this for yourself and read it. But this guy was talking about Harima Biff and the sacrifice of Maid and all these type of things, and how a motley child of mirth was born, which is the clown character, but while talking about demons and all sorts of things. It's really nuts, right? And from his words about Harima Biff, I know he was at least a third degree Mason, because they do rituals about Harima Biff at the third degree, which
the resurrection.
You can go find out again. It's not even hidden.
Death and resurrection. You live out.
Yeah, the death and resurrection, because he died keeping the secrets, all that sort of stuff. He refused to give the secrets to the men who demanded it, and it's kind of like it's a symbol of you have to keep these secrets to the death. Otherwise, we'll just kill you anyway, basically. But anyway, he was a member of the Freemasons. He clearly saw the demonic iconography and brought it back to Britain, and then told his son or something, or his son went to India with him. I don't know what happened, but they worked together. The
knowledge
clearly,
was passed.
Next thing you know, the British clown is dressed like a Rakshasa demon of India. Identical. Makeup and everything. Okay, so there you go. Harlequin, modelled after European versions of demons, or Nephilim, which is the wild man. Clown, 200 years later, gets dressed like the Eastern version, the Rakshasa, the Gorgon with the wide smile. The same thing, the same creature. It's their flavour of Nephilim is what the clown gets dressed like. Then that gets copied and pasted and developed over the next 200 years through the Freemason-run circuses. All of them Freemason-run. All of them obsessed with Solomon, and you realise, a circus is just an analogue for a Freemason lodge ritual. You have the ringmaster with the top hat. That's the grand worshipful master of a lodge, the only member of a lodge who's allowed to wear a top hat. That represents the crown of King Solomon. Only the king can wear a crown. King Solomon, they love the guy. He used his ring, his magical ring, to control the demons and get them to build his temple. Freemasons are obsessed with building Solomon's court and his temple, building Solomon temple analogues. So the ringmaster, the lord of the ring of a circus, is Solomon, the ringmaster, the Lord of the Ring, King Solomon, orchestrating the clowns to put on the ritual circus. He's orchestrating the Nephilim to build the temple. It's the same analogy, just with costumes and name changes. But a Freemason, a circus performance in the early days was just a Freemasonic ritual on a huge, grand scale with spectacle. These are invocation rituals. It's their version of what these ancient cultures are doing. They are venerating, dressing like, and channeling the spirits. And they do it in the public. The public pay. The public take part. God knows what else happens to the public who do take part in these early rituals. Nowadays, circuses aren't quite what they used to be. But they're all still run in America by the Shriners, if you look into it. And the Shriners all have their own clown section. The Shriner clowns. What's a Middle Eastern themed mystery wisdom school got to do with Western clowns? Why are they dressing that way? It's because it's the costume that they wear to communicate with their bosses, like the demons on the other side. They're using it as a tool, and publicly. The public think it's a bit of fun for the kids. They don't even know, you know. Then a step above shrining, you have the Royal Order of the Jesters. And you have to be invited to be a jester. You can't just ask. If you ask, you'll never be a member. That's how it works. And they are embroiled in some of the worst human abuses imaginable when you start looking into what they have been caught out doing. FBI files are out in the open for you to read about what members of this organization have gotten up to. It's the worst. The worst things you can imagine. And that's the highest honor. Once you've gone through all the 33 ranks of Freemasonry, you get invited to you become a Shriner and work all your way up to the 13 levels of Shrining. You could be invited and become a member of the elite group at the very top, which is the Jesters. Clowns have always and always will be a Freemasonic secret society, occult symbol to represent the demons. It was from the very beginning, and it's still used today. And it's even in their names. The Royal Order of the Jesters, really. Why is that the highest order of Freemasonry? Jesters. What have Jesters got to do with the Scottish Rite? Well, when you understand my theory and what I'm saying here, things start to make sense.
You tie in the dots. Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on and laying this out and really deep diving on the wild, man. I know that's one thing I really wanted to touch base with you, and you nailed that. I really appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can find you, website, socials, YouTube channel. Let everybody know where they can find you and all your content.
Sure, yeah. So I'm predominantly on YouTube. You'll find me there under Understanding Conspiracy. Go to the playlist section first, and you'll see I talk about many things, but there is a specific playlist called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns if you want everything I've done on that subject. You can also go to collaborations and podcasts, and you'll find me doing this, what I've done with you today, with many people over the past 2 years. Loads of different information, long form stuff there as well, summary stuff. So that's where you can find all the clown work. I am also on Rumble and all the backup channels, all the backup websites. If you want to go and subscribe to them as well, you can find me just by searching for Understanding Conspiracy. You can search the book if you want by going to GoFundMe. The book is about to be published in a couple of months, probably mid-June, early June is my predicted timescale here. So if you want to get the book to support me and get more of the information, I've read a section of it here today. If you want all of that, you can look forward to that in a couple of months' time. It'll be on Amazon. But yeah, that's it. I am on YouTube. All my details are at the bottom of every video I posted. If you want to get in touch with me, or go to any of my other websites.
Nice. Paul, once again, thank you. And guys, hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully your perspective has been changed a little bit and your eyes have been opened, because I think Paul did a really good job of explaining something that I believe, if this was the first time you heard it, sounded a little off to you. But I think Paul did an amazing job doing the research, lining up the dots, and pointing the way. Until next time, guys, torches high.